Hey everybody, hope your Monday is going well. I wanted to post something for you to help you prepare for our upcoming midterm. Your terms are posted, and so there's a list of terms that we have gone over so far, and I've put up a little header here so you can remember what needs to be included. Think about your first paragraph that you do for your weekly reactions: who, what, when, where, that kind of stuff. You're doing the same thing here in terms of the context as well. Right? You're just doing it in a nice, robust paragraph. And so if we took something like the bonus army, which we covered last class in the 1920s and the beginning of the Depression, but we didn't really go over it all that much, and it's on the list, so I'm just going to cover this one and we won't have to study it. If you don't remember, the bonus army was a bunch of veterans, thousands of veterans from World War I who were poor because the Great Depression had hit and there weren't really any pensions yet. They had been promised what's called a bonus, aka a pension, probably in 1945, and they needed it sooner because they were all struggling with the Depression. So they got their families together and they marched on the Capitol and they demanded their bonuses. And Hoover, the president, called out the army instead of talking with them and burned their encampments, and it all got filmed and it went really poorly, right? So if we break that down a little bit, think about who's involved here, right? So we have veterans, but then remember that I talked about specific, I can't spell today, historical information and terminology. So if you're going to do an exercise like this, always try to use as much specific historical information and terminology as possible. So, yes, there are veterans, right? But more specifically, World War I veterans, right? Who else is involved? Herbert Hoover is involved, right? The military is involved. That's pretty good right there. That covers quite a few people. Okay. What is the bonus army? Think about what is it? A bunch of people rallying. You may recall a protest would be a good way of putting this. Some people call it like a social movement. Probably a protest would be best. I'll take that down a size. There we go. What's involved? Let's see. The Great Depression is involved. Right, we've got pensions. There's some violence in there, so there's like a riot. Right, this is just helping you brainstorm a good bit. Think about when. Now, this is a specific year. This one works pretty easily. This one happened in 1932. That's pretty simple for us. Where did this happen? Well, they marched on the Capitol. So they literally marched on the Capitol. Capitol, a.k.a. Washington, D.C., right? How did it come to pass? This is really the story, right? They demand bonuses due in 1945 because of Depression. March on D.C. Hoover calls out Army, burns encampments, all caught on film. Now we're talking about the significance, right? Who cares? Why should we care? Hoover's popularity crumbled, and if you notice the date, It's 1932, so there was an election that year. So this definitely, I mean, besides the Depression, this was definitely a factor that contributed to him getting destroyed in the 1932 election by FDR. People were still going to movies during the Depression. It's one of the most affordable ways for you to kind of escape your life. You may notice that still happens today. What else do we know? What else is significant? Well, it tells us that we didn't used to take care of our veterans. Not to say that we do the best job today, but it's the Depression. People need a lot of help. They've served their country. They're promised a pension, but because their pension isn't due for another 13 years, they don't get it. And it doesn't matter if you march on the Capitol. The military will be called out against former military, right? So treatment of veterans in question. So in question. Let's try to spell better. And there's Grammarly at work for you. So I've got a little bit of what's going on, and then I've got all of the main pieces. So we would then want to say, put this in a narrative. In 1932, I know a little bit about this. During one of the worst years of the Great Depression. See, there's that specific terminology. World War I veterans. And if we were more specific, there are thousands of them. I think you'll be able to find the number if you look it up. Thousands of World War I veterans marched on the Capitol at Washington, D.C. So let's see here. Okay, what are they coming there for? What's involved? These veterans were promised a bonus in 1945, but were demanding early payment because of the economic crisis. That sounds good. What else? So now we're getting into what happened. Did we get where, yes, when, yes. I got a couple dates in there. That's good. I got the veterans in there. That's good. I don't have Hoover and the military in there. I got the Depression in there. Did I mention that it was a protest? I said they marched. Maybe I should put protesting in there. It's a protest. Very good. Herbert Hoover, let's see, current president Herbert Hoover decided instead of listening to their demands to call out the military to remove the veterans. As a result, Hoover's actions were caught on film, devastating his popularity in the upcoming election. So that's not perfect, but that's decent. So there's a paragraph there, and I could look back through this and say, okay, what haven't I included? I didn't talk about the treatment of veterans, so if I wanted to wrap that up, I could talk about the treatment of veterans. I didn't mention there was a social movement, and again, like we mentioned in class, specifics get you everywhere. So, for instance, if you know of a good quote, like there's a really famous quote where they held up signs and they said, "We were heroes then, but we're bums now." That helps because that's specific. Other things that have happened at this time period, it turns out that two of America's most famous generals in World War II were actually in this military. And so George Patton and Douglas MacArthur were called out to attack World War I veterans. And they became, like I said, some of the most famous generals ever. So those kinds of details to add in here would be very helpful. But notice this is a narrative. It's got specifics. Well, obviously, I don't need a comma there, right? I've got my specifics that I need. And it's to the point. It's not, 2 pages of rambling stuff. I hope that this has helped a little bit. And I will see you Thursday.